Dr. Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she glanced at the clock on the wall of her veterinary clinic. It was already past 8 in the evening, and she had been working nonstop for 12 hours straight. The small animal hospital in downtown Los Angeles was always busy, but today had been particularly overwhelming. 3 emergency surgeries, 2 difficult births, and countless routine checkups had left her exhausted and irritable. The waiting room was finally empty, and Sarah was looking forward to closing up and heading home to her own 2 rescue cats. She had just finished cleaning the last examination room when she heard the familiar chime of the front door. Her heart sank as she realized someone else had walked in just as she was about to lock up. Through the reception area window, she could see a tall figure in a baseball cap and worn leather jacket, cradling what appeared to be a small dog wrapped in a blanket. The man's long hair was partially hidden under his cap, and he moved with an urgent but gentle manner that suggested genuine concern for his pet. Sarah let out a frustrated sigh. She understood that pet emergencies didn't follow business hours, but she was beyond tired. Her staff had already left for the day, and she was running on nothing but coffee and determination. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows in the clinic, making everything feel sterile and cold. As she reluctantly walked toward the front desk, she could hear the man speaking softly to whatever animal he was carrying. His voice was calm but worried, the kind of tone that pet owners use when they're trying to comfort their beloved companions while fighting their own anxiety. The man looked up as Sarah approached, and she caught a glimpse of kind brown eyes filled with concern. However, her exhaustion clouded her usual compassionate judgment. All she could think about was how much she wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. Without really looking at the man or his pet properly, Sarah found herself saying the words she would later deeply regret. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she delivered what would become the biggest mistake of her veterinary career, setting in motion a series of events that would change her perspective on compassion, celebrity, and the true meaning of emergency care. The man stood quietly for a moment, clearly taken aback by her response. The small bundle in his arms shifted slightly, and Sarah could see it was indeed a dog, though she hadn't taken the time to assess the severity of its condition. The silence in the clinic felt heavy and uncomfortable. What Sarah didn't realize in that moment of poor judgment was that she was about to turn away not just any pet owner, but someone whose identity would soon make her question everything about her priorities as a veterinarian. The tired doctor was about to learn a lesson about assumptions, compassion, and the importance of treating every patient with equal care, regardless of who was holding them. Sarah crossed her arms and shook her head firmly. "I'm sorry, but we're closed for the day. You'll need to find an emergency animal hospital that's open 24 hours. There's one about 15 minutes away on Sunset Boulevard." Her voice carried the weariness of the long day, but also an edge of impatience that she rarely allowed her clients to hear. The man in the baseball cap shifted the blanket-wrapped dog in his arms, and Sarah could see the animal's breathing was labored. "Please, I know you're closed, but she's really not doing well. I think she might have eaten something toxic, and she's been vomiting for the past hour. I was driving by and saw your lights were still on." His voice remained calm and polite, despite the obvious urgency of the situation. Sarah glanced at the bundle again, noticing for the first time that the small dog appeared to be a senior pit bull mix with graying fur around her muzzle. The animal's eyes were half closed, and she could see traces of foam around the dog's mouth. Any other day, these symptoms would have immediately triggered her emergency protocols, but tonight her exhaustion overrode her professional instincts. "Look, I understand you're worried about your dog, but I've been here since 7 this morning. I'm not equipped to handle emergencies right now without my full staff," Sarah explained, though even as she said it, she knew she was making excuses. She had handled plenty of emergency cases on her own before, and this particular situation didn't look like it required complex procedures. The man nodded understandingly, though disappointment flickered across his features. "I completely get that you've had a long day. I just thought maybe you could at least take a quick look at her. I can pay whatever emergency fee you normally charge." He adjusted his grip on the dog, who whimpered softly. Something about his gentle persistence should have touched Sarah's heart, but instead it only made her more defensive. She was tired of being taken advantage of by pet owners who expected her to be available around the clock. The emergency clinic on Sunset has a full staff and proper equipment for after-hours cases. They'll be able to help you much better than I can right now. The man looked down at his dog, whose condition seemed to be deteriorating even in the few minutes they had been talking. The animal's breathing had become more shallow and her body appeared limp in his arms. "All right, I understand. Thank you anyway." His voice held no anger or frustration, only resignation and worry. As he turned to leave, Sarah caught a glimpse of the dog's face more clearly. The poor animal looked genuinely distressed, and for a moment, her veterinary instincts kicked in. She almost called out to stop him, almost offered to at least examine the pet quickly, but her exhaustion and irritation won out, and she watched as the man walked back toward the door. The gentle way he cradled the dog, whispering reassuring words as they left, should have been Sarah's first clue that this wasn't just any ordinary pet owner. The genuine love and concern in his actions spoke of someone who truly understood the value of animal life and the bond between humans and their pets. As the door closed behind the mysterious man and his sick dog, Sarah stood in the empty reception area, feeling an uncomfortable knot forming in her stomach. The silence of the clinic suddenly felt oppressive rather than peaceful. She tried to shake off the nagging feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake, but something about the encounter wouldn't leave her mind. Sarah began her closing routine, turning off equipment and organizing files for the next day, but her movements were mechanical and distracted. The image of the sick dog's labored breathing kept flashing through her mind. In her 8 years as a veterinarian, she had never turned away an animal that clearly needed help, regardless of the circumstances. She paused at the reception desk, staring at the door where the man had exited. There had been something familiar about him, something that nagged at the edge of her consciousness. The way he moved, the cadence of his voice, even his patient and understanding response to her rejection felt oddly recognizable. Unable to focus on her closing duties, Sarah found herself walking to the front window and peering out into the parking lot. The man was still there, sitting in what appeared to be an older model motorcycle with the dog still wrapped in the blanket on his lap. Even from a distance, she could see him gently stroking the animal's head while appearing to make phone calls, presumably trying to locate an open emergency clinic. The sight made Sarah's guilt intensify. Here was someone clearly devoted to his pet, sitting in a parking lot at night desperately trying to find help for a suffering animal, and she, a trained veterinarian with a fully equipped clinic, had turned them away because she was tired. As she continued watching, the man removed his baseball cap to run his fingers through his hair in what appeared to be a gesture of frustration or worry. In that moment, with the parking lot lights illuminating his profile, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The distinctive features, the shoulder-length dark hair, the way he held himself, it all clicked into place with stunning clarity. She was looking at Keanu Reeves, the beloved Hollywood actor known not just for his iconic roles in movies like The Matrix and John Wick, but also for his reputation as one of the kindest and most genuine people in the entertainment industry. Stories of his generosity, humility, and love for animals were legendary among both fans and industry insiders. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as the full impact of what she had done hit her. She hadn't just turned away any pet owner. She had refused help to someone who was famous for his compassion and philanthropy. More importantly, she had failed in her fundamental duty as a veterinarian to provide care for an animal in need, regardless of who owned them. The realization made her feel physically sick. Keanu Reeves, a man who had given millions to charity, who regularly donated to animal shelters and rescue organizations, who was known for treating everyone from fans to service workers with kindness and respect, had come to her clinic seeking help for his beloved dog, and she had turned him away. Through the window, she watched as he continued to comfort the dog while presumably speaking to someone on the phone about emergency veterinary options. His entire focus was on the animal in his arms, showing the same gentle care that had made him a favorite among animal lovers worldwide. Sarah's professional training suddenly overrode her shock and exhaustion. Without hesitation, she grabbed her keys and rushed toward the front door, her heart pounding with a mixture of embarrassment and determination. She couldn't let an animal suffer because of her poor judgment, and she certainly couldn't live with herself knowing she had failed both as a veterinarian and as a decent human being. She burst through the clinic door and hurried across the parking lot, waving her arms to get Keanu's attention. He looked up from his phone call with surprise as she approached his motorcycle, still cradling the visibly distressed dog in his arms. "Wait, please don't go," Sarah called out, slightly out of breath from her sprint across the parking lot. I'm so sorry about earlier. I was completely out of line. Please bring your dog back inside. I want to help her. Keanu ended his phone call and studied Sarah's face carefully, as if trying to gauge whether she was sincere or simply having second thoughts for the wrong reasons. Are you sure? I don't want to impose if you're really not able to provide care right now. I found an emergency clinic that's open and they said they could see her. No, please, I insist, Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine regret. I let my exhaustion cloud my judgment, and that's not who I am as a veterinarian. Your dog needs help now, and I have everything here that she needs. There's no reason for you to drive across town when I can take care of her right here. The sincerity in Sarah's voice seemed to convince him. Keanu nodded and carefully stood up, adjusting his grip on the blanket-wrapped dog. Thank you. I really appreciate this. Her name is Daisy, and she's been with me for 8 years. I rescued her when she was just a puppy. As they walked back toward the clinic, Sarah got her first good look at the dog in proper lighting. Daisy was indeed a senior pit bull mix with beautiful brindle markings and the sweetest face, despite her current distress. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, and Sarah could see clear signs of poisoning or toxic ingestion. When did you first notice she was sick? Sarah asked as she quickly unlocked the clinic and guided them toward the main examination room. About 2 hours ago. We were at the dog park and I noticed her eating something in the grass before I could stop her. Within 30 minutes, she started vomiting and became lethargic. I've been trying to find veterinary care ever since, Keanu explained, his voice tight with worry as he gently placed Daisy on the examination table. Sarah immediately began her assessment, checking Daisy's vital signs and examining her mouth and gums. The dog's condition was serious but not critical, and Sarah felt confident she could provide the necessary treatment. As she worked, she was struck by how Keanu stayed close to Daisy, speaking to her in soothing tones and keeping one hand gently resting on her back. You did the right thing bringing her in when you did, Sarah said as she prepared to insert an IV line. Based on her symptoms, it looks like she may have ingested something toxic, possibly mushrooms or another plant at the dog park. We'll need to flush her system and monitor her closely, but I think she's going to be fine. The relief that washed over Keanu's face was unmistakable. Thank you so much for doing this. I know you were closed, and I really appreciate you making an exception. As Sarah worked to stabilize Daisy, administering fluids and medication to counteract the toxins in her system, she found herself stealing glances at Keanu. Despite being one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, he seemed completely focused on his dog's well-being, showing none of the entitled behavior she might have expected from a celebrity. She's responding well to the treatment, Sarah reported as Daisy's breathing began to steady and her color improved. The IV fluids are helping flush the toxins from her system, and her vital signs are stabilizing. I'd like to keep her here for observation for a few hours just to make sure she's completely out of danger. Keanu nodded gratefully, never taking his eyes off Daisy. Whatever she needs. Can I stay with her? I don't want her to be alone in a strange place while she's recovering. The request touched Sarah's heart. In her experience, truly devoted pet owners always wanted to stay close during medical emergencies, but she was surprised by how natural and unpretentious Keanu's concern seemed. There was no performance or attempt to impress anyone, just genuine love for his dog. Of course you can stay, Sarah replied, pulling up a chair next to the examination table. Actually, it's good for her to have you nearby. Animals recover better when they feel safe and loved. As they settled in for the waiting period, Keanu began sharing stories about Daisy and how she had come into his life. He spoke about finding her as an abused puppy at a shelter, how she had helped him through difficult times in his career and personal life, and the joy she brought to his daily routine. People think actors live these glamorous lives, but honestly, some of my happiest moments are just walking Daisy in the morning or having her curl up next to me while I read scripts, he said, gently stroking the dog's head as she rested. She doesn't care about movies or fame or any of that. She just loves unconditionally. Sarah found herself genuinely moved by his words and his obvious devotion to his pet. She realized that her initial impression of him as just another demanding client couldn't have been more wrong. Here was someone who understood the true value of the human-animal bond. I have to apologize again for my behavior earlier, Sarah said, checking Daisy's IV line. I was completely unprofessional. In all my years as a veterinarian, I've never turned away an animal that needed help. I let my exhaustion get the better of me, and that's no excuse. Keanu looked at her with understanding in his eyes. We all have bad days. What matters is that you recognized it and made it right. Daisy is getting excellent care now, and that's what's important. His gracious response made Sarah feel even worse about her initial rejection. She began to understand why Keanu Reeves had such a reputation for kindness. It wasn't an act or a public relations strategy. It was simply who he was as a person. As the hours passed, Sarah observed how Keanu interacted not just with his dog, but with her as well. He asked thoughtful questions about veterinary medicine, expressed genuine interest in her career path, and even helped clean up the examination room without being asked. When her phone rang with a personal call, he offered to watch Daisy so she could step out and answer it privately. By 3 a.m, Daisy had made a complete recovery. Her appetite had returned, her energy was back to normal, and all her vital signs were perfect. Sarah removed the IV line and gave her a final examination, declaring her ready to go home. She's going to be just fine, Sarah announced with a smile. Just keep an eye on her for the next day or two. Make sure she's eating and drinking normally, and maybe avoid that particular section of the dog park for a while. Keanu's relief was evident as he scooped Daisy into his arms, receiving enthusiastic licks to his face in return. Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. You've been incredible tonight. What do I owe you for the emergency treatment? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. There's no charge. Consider it my apology for the way I treated you both earlier. You came here seeking help for your beloved pet, and I turned you away. That goes against everything I believe in as a veterinarian. That's very generous, but I insist on paying, Keanu replied firmly. You stayed here all night, used your medical supplies, and provided excellent care. You deserve to be compensated for your work. After some gentle back and forth, Sarah finally agreed to accept payment for the medical supplies and treatments used, but refused to charge for her time. As Keanu wrote out a check, he paused and looked up at her thoughtfully. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I can tell you're someone who really cares about animals. Tonight was probably just an exception, not the rule for how you normally treat your patients. Don't let one bad moment define your view of yourself as a veterinarian. His words hit Sarah harder than any criticism could have. The kindness and understanding he showed, even after her initial rejection, made her realize how much her attitude had changed over the years. The long hours, difficult cases, and demanding clients had gradually worn down her compassion. 3 weeks later, Sarah received an unexpected envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a substantial check made out to her clinic, along with a simple note, for the animals who need help, from someone who believes in second chances. It was signed simply KR. The donation was enough to cover several months of pro bono emergency treatments for pet owners who couldn't afford veterinary care. Sarah immediately established a fund specifically for after-hours emergency cases, ensuring that no animal would ever be turned away due to financial constraints or the lateness of the hour. But the real change in Sarah went deeper than money. The encounter with Keanu and Daisy had reminded her why she became a veterinarian in the first place. She began staying late again when animals needed help, started volunteering at local shelters on weekends, and approached each patient with renewed empathy and dedication. Months later, Sarah would often think about that night and the lessons she learned about judging people by appearances and circumstances. She had nearly missed the opportunity to help an animal in need because of her own exhaustion and assumptions. More importantly, she had discovered that true character reveals itself not in moments of convenience, but in how we treat others when we're tired, stressed, or dealing with our own problems. The story of her encounter with Keanu Reeves and Daisy became a turning point in her career, reminding her that every animal deserves care, every owner deserves compassion, and every day offers the chance to make a positive difference in the world, one patient at a time.